The perfect movie trilogy is few and far between, and even less movie trilogies have a perfect ending. Toy Story, for example, especially Toy Story 3, it took years to complete and had two great predecessors before it, but in the end, was able to deliver one of the most satisfying endings in cinema history.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Which included a heartfelt message about growing up, loss, and purpose, while adding a tear-jerking farewell to Andy, a complete ending to the story built up over the course of years. Similarly to that, the Lord of the Rings trilogy had a combination of timeless storytelling, masterful filmmaking, and emotional depth, with cultural resonance that feels unmatched, while also having a satisfying conclusion to the story. Another example would be Indiana Jones. The last installment of the trilogy ends with our heroes learning the importance of family, friendship, and letting your aspirations go, and not being awed by life's work even if it's within arm's reach. It literally ends with them riding off into the sunset. How could you end any better than that? But the unfortunate thing that all three of those franchises have in common is after having the perfect conclusion, they decided to make more. Which is a generational sickness Hollywood suffers from. They have an inability to let a franchise rest. Like when they made the Hobbit movies. That's a one-off book turned into a theatrical trilogy spanning over years. Or after almost 2 decades deciding to make Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which is hated by a majority of the fan base, feeling unnecessary considering the ending of Last Crusade. But even that wasn't the end. To try and leave it off on a higher note, they did Dial of Destiny 15 years later, which isn't much better, but at least it somewhat satisfied fans. And now Toy Story is guilty of the same.
No! God, please, no! No!
They decided to make a 4th movie after 9 years when there was no reason to because 3 had a perfect ending. And 4 was completely out of nowhere, a brand new movie that completely ruined Woody's character. He had integrity, loyalty to the kid that he's with. And in Toy Story 4, he throws that all out the window and decides that he's going to be a lost toy with Bo Peep, while also sidelining Buzz to comedic relief, making him come off as less intelligent, and that he can only make decisions by pressing his buttons because he doesn't understand what an inner voice is. This movie split the fan base completely, some loving it and others hating it because the 3rd one ended everything perfectly. It left a terrible taste in many people's mouths. And so now, 7 years later, they're telling another unnecessary story to try and rebound their past letdown. Which brings us to Toy Story 5, an enjoyable but not necessary movie. It doesn't contribute anything to lift up the previous films, other than make up for 4 being so disliked. Now don't get me wrong, Toy Story 5 isn't a bad movie by any means. It tells a great story heavily centered around Jessie and her struggles with Bonnie and technology while also hiding from her past. 5 is about how she cares about Bonnie, wanting to try and help her make friends and fit in, especially in a world ruled by technology where toys aren't really played with anymore. More so, Jessie makes it her responsibility to get Bonnie friends, and by doing that, she brings her greatest enemy into the home, Lilypad, who is a tablet who has the ability to add her to a group chat with some girls from dance, essentially giving her friends in a way. Jessie thinks all is well, but now they realize that Bonnie is being consumed by it like the other kids. And when she's invited to a sleepover, Jessie and Bullseye sneak into her bag when she isn't around. Bonnie arrives at the sleepover and she is excited to play. She brings her toys over to show the other children and is laughed at for still playing with them, which makes her feel insecure, so she runs back and decides to leave her toys and bring her Lilypad instead. Which then Jessie and Bullseye jump out of the car and climb into a tree to see what the kids are doing in the house. And they're all on their devices, bringing Jessie to the realization that she made a mistake. And in the process, Jessie falls out of the tree and is found by an old couple who look on the inside of her pant leg and see the old address of her first owner. That couple decides to take her to the old address, where we meet our other main human character, Blaze, who's a 9.5-year-old little girl who has forgotten how to play with toys but still enjoys them like Bonnie, and who is also struggling at making friends. So essentially, the rest of the movie, Jessie is using the old tech toys she meets to communicate with the new Lilypad, to try and get these two girls to meet each other and form a long-lasting friendship where they play with toys. It's a decent story, it's entertaining, it's funny, and it attempts to jerk some tears and have an emotional moment, while also exploring the difficulties that technology comes with. Not that it's definitively good or bad, but it depends on how you use it. But the main problems I have with this movie were initiated in Toy Story 4, which is a complete dismantling of our loved side characters who spend majority of this movie in a box in the garage, and introduce new ones that aren't as memorable or are even used in the ending play session between the two kids. And it takes our two favorite characters, Buzz and Woody, and completely diminishes them of their intelligence. If we look back back at the first movie, Woody is a strong leader and a great problem solver. He's Andy's favorite toy and balances that responsibility perfectly. Until Buzz comes along and that leadership and favorite toy position is challenged. And Buzz begins growth in his own way. He's clearly intelligent, he fits in easily, he's a problem solver. Toy Story 1 shows the growth of the characters, that friendship and family is more important than being the most popular or number one toy. It shows their ability to work together in different situations and put their differences aside to get back to Andy because that's their purpose. And Toy Story 2 expands on that idea of purpose, or being forgotten. Woody becomes damaged and he can no longer be played with, and all the fears return, being replaced or thrown out, not having a purpose. Buzz also becomes more important. He takes over as leader while Woody is gone, and he plans how to get him back. He's able to formulate a search and rescue plan and coordinate with the other toys what's happening next. And when Buzz eventually finds Woody, he's able to comfort him, while also making him remember what his purpose is, which is to be there for Andy, and that a toy's purpose is to be played with. It's two characters using empathy, strength, resilience, compassion, and most of all, leadership, which is a concept continued in the third movie. During the trash compactor scene, they decide if they're gonna go out, it's going to be together, with one another hand in hand. 3 perfectly ends the story full circle. They were there for Andy, they were there for the other toys, and they were there for each other when all odds were stacked against them. But that is the complete opposite in Toy Story 5. Much like 4, it takes those two strong masculine characters and strips them down to nothing more than an extended cameo. Woody shows up because he thinks Jessie needs his help, not because she actually does. She says she doesn't need anyone's help. She has to fix this problem herself. And even with Buzz, he was always courageous, honorable, and sensible. He could make a decision in the heat of the moment. He's not questioning the decisions anymore. He's led the group before, but in this he's not even capable to tell Jessie he wants to marry her. Buzz is stripped of all his confidence. Now don't get me wrong, the movie is a great concept. It tells a fresh story with a great premise, the era of toys being taken over by technology, and how you would navigate that world. But in doing that, it diminishes all its integrity of its other characters. Buzz and Woody are on a wild goose chase the whole movie, while Jessie is the one doing everything by herself. Because if Buzz and Woody weren't there, the high-tech Buzzes who were introduced as a little side plot would still have found Jessie. She still would have had help from the older tech, and the movie would have still ended the same way. So I guess my problem with the movie is you shouldn't have to dumb down your strong characters in order to make one seem smarter than they really are. And that's what I feel like they did with Jessie. She's always been a great character, but to backseat Buzz and Woody and make them nothing more than a glorified cameo while they basically just fight over who's going to be her deputy the whole movie is unfortunate. And to not focus on the bigger issue of our friend's been taken, how do we get her back? Which in turn would spend more screen time with them on that adventure. So in the end, it's a good story, but it's not a necessary story. The franchise ended perfectly in Toy Story 3. And I guess this one's a little more personal for me because growing up, there was always something Toy Story. It had been established. I had a Woody and I had a Buzz like a lot of kids. So to see them minimized to nothing more than a cameo or comedic relief, also the fact that they're barely on the screen is upsetting. And I don't think that's just me. I think some other kids are resonating that same way. I was sitting in my theater and a little boy behind me about 25 minutes into the movie yelled, "Where's Woody?" Which just goes to show that their presence wasn't being used enough. But I look at it like this. Toy Story is over. It's been over. The Toy Story I know ended with 3. 4 and 5 are just a deconstruction of cherished characters. And it's Disney's greed taking over because they know they'll have guaranteed success. Even if that means destroying the perfect conclusion to one of the longest running film franchises and the first ever computer animated movie. Because think about it. Over the course of 15 years we grew up with Andy. And at the end of 3, most kids his age during the first one were also graduating high school and heading off to college. But Bonnie, on the other hand, has been age locked for over a decade. In Toy Story 3, she's 4, and in Toy Story 5, she's 8, when 16 years have gone by since Andy gave her our heroes. So in the end, she's essentially there for the sake of telling more stories, to make more money. It's Hollywood's inability to let an IP rest after a satisfying ending to the story. But what do you think? Did you enjoy Toy Story 5? Which is your favorite in the franchise? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.